Game journalism is in a really weird spot. I oftentimes think that people are trying to push a narrative and they're not really out to seek out what's really true. And I totally get it. Like, you have an agenda you want to push, you have a belief that you don't want to let go of. Whatever the reason may be, I actually kind of empathize with it. And I understand it's not easy to face the reality and the truth of what's really going on, but it's useful for everybody when you do. I just think it's so weird that you don't go out of your way to do a little bit of extra searching, a little bit of extra digging just to see what's really real or not, because I think it helps everybody. I think when you actually know the reality of what's going on, it helps everybody make a better informed decision on both the consumer end and the business end, because then we overall would have better games that include more people, that reach more people, and profit more. And then overall, you'd have a better functioning business as a whole. So something that triggered this thought was this article. Not this article specifically, but there's a sentiment that Avowed is topping bestsellers lists despite Steam backlash. Okay, that's great. People are going to the Steam's top seller list as the thing that makes this true, which is weird. As far as I know, I like this list. I like the top sellers list, but these are really temporary. This is based on complete revenue only, which explains why there's free things here. So when it's only based on revenue, and I think it's only on like a pretty short cycle because these tend to shift a lot. That means you have, especially on launch day, you have something like Avowed. Obviously, it sells more copies at the first 2 days of launch because that's when most people are going to be buying it. And there were articles saying that it was doing better than Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, even though Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 came out weeks ago. So it's almost like a bad sign that Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is even close to Avowed if you're trying to like punch by punch the numbers, which this kind of isn't what it is. So like, I don't know, let's just dig a little bit and try to see what's true or not. So this is the original thing that sparked it, I think. Avowed is a #1 seller in US on Steam. Sure, great, have that. I want to dig a little deeper. How many people are playing Avowed? It's about 17,500. That to me, on a gut feeling, is pretty low. And I think a useful comparison here is other games that came out on Game Pass and Steam roughly at the same time. So I have Stalker here, which is doing insanely well. And how many copies or how many players did Stalker have? About 1 million after 2 days, which is a lot. And that would probably count for 2 days, which is a lot. You have Outer Worlds, which I don't really account for because it was 4 years ago. Game Pass is in such a different state now. So it's hard to compare the two. Outer Worlds was kind of the first game where I thought that this service had some legs. That, oh, we're actually getting cool full release launch day AAA style things within this service, and that was pretty cool. So too old, and I'm probably gonna like for comparison's sake dismiss it because I think the subscriber growth of Game Pass has been much higher now than it was back then. And I had one here that said it sold 2 million units. Again, different times. It was like over 5 years ago at this point. So not counting that. To here, Indiana Jones is actually a pretty good close comparison because this was just 2 months ago, which came out on Steam and Game Pass kind of roughly at the same time. So it's a good comparison because the subscriber numbers would be pretty close. The audience might be a little bit different, but it's a really useful number to have in your face of like, okay, 12,000 here means how much? They have over 4 million players for 12,000. So that means it is safe to assume in my head that Avowed is probably going to reach 4 million people playing it, at least. Where the revenue comes from, that part is hard to grasp because once you throw Game Pass in it, it's hard to dictate how much is Game Pass and how much are people buying it. Cool. I pulled up Starfield just to kind of get comparison numbers. Still a little bit too far away, but I mean, Starfield did really well on Steam. This one's like a lower confidence comparison just because Starfield was always going to sell great, even if people didn't really like enjoy it as much as say your Skyrim or your Fallout 4. And just for comparison's sake, I did looked up. Seems like there are about 50 million players. It's a very healthy game, but I didn't really bother to look into it any more than that. I also pulled up Dragon Age Veilguard just to see where they're at. This one is kind of hard to compare to because they're not on Game Pass. But I think EA Play has their own subscription numbers. And I looked up copies sold, 1.5 million players. And I think that's sold. I don't know if there are numbers somewhere of how many players are compared to copies sold, but copies sold is a pretty good hard number because that's money in the pocket, not just like players from Game Pass. So someone that does this much probably sells around this much, which also now when I'm thinking about it tells me that this number probably means they sold very little, but they also means a lot of people are playing the game from Game Pass, which I think is what Microsoft wants. So I don't know. The conclusion of this kind of stuff is weird. It's like, despite backlash, it tops bestsellers, like a lot of things top bestsellers. Actually, the true hero of the story is that Monster Hunter Wilds is right up here beating everything, and it's not even out for another 7 days. Like, the hype for this game and the numbers for this game is going to be insane. I want to know the numbers for that because this is successful. It's completely demolishing two of the biggest hits that came out recently. Okay, cool. That's one story. Another story that got me was the Marvel's director and team have been laid off. This headline has been copied into so many places, which I find really silly. Marvel Writer's game director and others laid off. A lot of the headlines when this was coming out, like 2 days ago, did have just straight up this. And it made you think that they laid off the entire core team. And that's what everyone was saying, including people in the industry. Everybody was freaking out that I was talking to that they just threw away the entire team when it was doing really well. Just want to take a quick look at numbers here. Like, yeah, that is a insanely healthy player base. And it's that no one bothered to check in what that is. No one bothered to really figure out how that all works. As far as I know, they laid off a support team based in Seattle, while the core development team mostly worked out of China. And that info is hard to find. If you look at Moby Games, which is usually pretty good for credits, they don't really list anybody. Nobody is credited. If you boot the game up, there's no place to click credits and watch the usual scroll thing. You just don't get any of that. The only way that we knew the names of some of the creative leads was from Wikipedia, which pulled the data from the award show for the DICE Awards. Like, this is the source. This is the source of the actual people, of the actual core team working on the game in China. We don't know what the head count for the rest of it is. We don't know how many people worked on it. Like, we have no idea what's going on there. And there's a lot of other things we don't know. Since China is this like separate culture, separate wall, we don't even know what layoffs happen there. We don't know if they're downsizing there. We don't know how they're going to support the global audience now. Like, did the Seattle people support the global audience? There's a lot of question marks here that I'm like, okay, well, like, did no one even think to try to look this up? And that's weird to me. I don't understand. Like, you're supposed to be game journalists, and it doesn't seem like they really go out of their way to try to see what's actually happening, because that's actually super useful for us to all come from a place of this is what's actually going on, and this is how we proceed forward. Outside of the culture stuff of whether you're into like woke or progressive or like the DEI stuff, that's like, it's almost a red herring. There's useful information for us to gather that can help us all make better games, all make better, more confident decisions as a business. Yeah, that's all I got today. Just a little bit of frustration because this is the kind of research that I like to do when I work in the industry. And sometimes it's frustrating to, this is all publicly available data, and a lot of people don't take advantage of it. That's all I got today. If you made it this far, please subscribe to the channel. I try to make one of these every day, and I'm a small-time creator, so every subscription really helps. Otherwise, that's all I got. See ya.